Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. We are continuing our series on NBA teams and giving them a deep dive perspective going into this upcoming NBA season. Now we are on to the Denver Nuggets. Looking at this, kind of a weird offseason for the Denver Nuggets. Their first round pick, DeRozan Holmes, was injured and will be out for the entirety of the year. I'm pretty sure he tore his Achilles, so he's going to be out for the entirety of the year, which hurts because I think they were kind of losing faith in Zeke Naji. They signed Russell Westbrook after he got bought up by the Utah Jazz in a trade with the Clippers. So looking at that, it was a kind of difficult offseason, especially with the way last season ended in Game 7 at home to the Minnesota Timberwolves. But interesting season on the horizon for the Denver Nuggets, who just won a championship the year prior. Looking at this, I have a lot of kind of questions and thoughts about this team. I still think they're going to be a really, really good team, but the loss of KCP is going to be huge in terms of their spacing, their defense. He's just the perfect glue guy that can make or break a season for a team, realistically. Like, when you look at kind of comparing this to, like, the Lakers, right? The Lakers traded KCP, Kyle Kuzma, to the Washington Wizards and other stuff in that trade for Russell Westbrook. Lakers were never able to get that same spark that got them the championship because they gave up those glue guy pieces to go name chase. That's already been a whole different discussion as well. But you lose KCP, who is a really vital piece of that just on both sides of the ball for you. So it's going to be very interesting. And you're replacing him kind of with a Christian Braun. I expect that to be the replacement. And I like Christian Braun as a player. But, like, replacing KCP, especially the shooting and spacing aspect, I think defensively Christian Braun is going to be fine. I think he's a big, stocky guard that when you looked at in that Minnesota Timberwolves series was holding his own against whoever he really had besides Anthony Edwards. There was times where he had Karl-Anthony Towns on the switch and he was getting posted up and he kind of held his own down there. Defensively, I think Christian Braun is going to be just fine. It's the offensive side that I'm really worried about with this team because, yes, you have Jamal Murray and you have Nikola Jokic, but it's like MPJ can be super hit or miss. We know that Aaron Gordon's offensive game can be super hit or miss. It's either one game he's giving me a 15 to 20 or he's giving me a like 6 to 8. And that's really not his role to begin with on the offensive side of the ball. So, like, with having Christian Braun, I felt like KCP was really that consistent factor that is going to give you anywhere between 9 to 12 to 13 points a night on good efficiency and also give you elite caliber defense. But now you're replacing Christian Braun, whose offensive game is still a big question mark for him, especially the spacing aspect of it. There's times where, like, he's just passing a wide open threes. He needs to build that confidence up to just be able to catch and shoot in rhythm, because that's really going to be what makes or breaks this Denver Nuggets team, because the spacing is huge for this team. With how their offense operates now, because you can't put Aaron Gordon and Christian Braun, and if Christian Braun hasn't improved that three-point shot, then it's going to be questions of what do the Denver Nuggets offense look like and what does that entail, because the spacing is huge for them. Having KCP, you can't leave KCP. You can't leave Jamal Murray. You can't leave MPJ. The only person on the court that you could leave, and it kind of killed the Denver Nuggets at certain times, but you needed him for his defense, was Aaron Gordon. But now you're kind of putting two inconsistent three-point shooters on the court. Then you're really relying on MPJ to, like, really be consistent. I feel like his game can really predicate on him being super up and down. There's times in that Minnesota Timberwolves series where he really struggled. A team that got physical, got up in him. An athletic, long team that can really just be able to chase him around screens and be able to close out and make him put the ball on the floor, which is something that he hasn't really added to his game yet at the NBA level. So looking at this, like, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this Denver Nuggets team performs. And looking at the offseason move of, like, a Russell Westbrook, after letting it sink in, I really like the move. I think this team has been missing, like, a jolt at times. I think you really saw it in that Minnesota Timberwolves series. They were just missing, like, a jolt, somebody off that bench that can just get going, get downhill, and just look to score, be aggressive. A lot of the guys on the Denver Nuggets benches just don't really look to be aggressive like that. When Russell Westbrook, if you give him the keys and the confidence, hey, when you get in the game, we want you to be aggressive. And I think that's when you're going to get the best version of Russell Westbrook. And people don't really talk about him defensively enough. Like, these past couple seasons with the Clippers, defensively, he has been phenomenal. Like, when you go look at the series against the Phoenix Suns, like two years ago now, the defense he was playing on Devin Booker was phenomenal. and he's been underrated. I'm not saying he's all NBA first team. Defensively, he has taken strides, and I feel like he is somebody who, if you wanted to start him next to a Jamal Murray, I think it could work, because then you're allowing Jamal Murray to not worry about the playmaking facilities at all. Now he's the third primary playmaker outside of Westbrook and Nikola Jokic. Now you're like, Jamal Murray, we need you to completely get off on offense. And I think you could see times where you're looking at a starting lineup of Russell Westbrook, Jamal Murray, MPJ, Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Jokic. You still kind of have the spacing issues when you do have Westbrook compared to Christian Braun on the court. I understand that, but I feel like if you kind of want to unlock Jamal Murray's offensive game a little bit more and allow him to be more of a two guard, which I think that's where he's going to thrive at times, playing off of Jokic more so, I think that could be a lineup that is really dangerous, even though it still has the spacing issues, but it allows more freedom, I feel like, for Jamal Murray. But the X factor for this team, X factor for the Denver Nuggets, MPJ. It has to be MPJ. He needs to take a jump. It has to be, he just has to be more consistent. I feel like on the offensive end, I feel like he has times where he's very, very hit or miss. But he's the guy who I'm looking at we need you to step up your offensive game if we want to continue to be really, really good in this Western Conference, because they're lacking guys offensively. There's nobody off that bench who I really trust offensively outside of Russell Westbrook, and we know how inconsistent he can be. So MPJ really needs to step up and be the third guy on this team. Especially, I feel like there's times where MPJ needs to be the second guy, depending on how Jamal Murray's injuries have been looking. He kind of goes throughout the course of a season, kind of missing at least a month or two. So looking at this, I feel like the X factor is MPJ. If he steps his game up and gets to that next level, I feel like this Denver team is still going to be very, very good. They're going to be very, very good regardless, even if MPJ doesn't take that stride. But if he does, I think he's the X factor for this team. My expectations for the Denver Nuggets going into next year, I still think they're going to be a dominant force. I really do. I think they're still going to be a top 3 to 4 team out west, even with how good the Western Conference is. When you have the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic, you still have Jamal Murray, you still have a great coach in Mike Malone. They still have all the pieces, even though they're missing KCP. I'm interested to see what they go with in terms of the lineups they do have, and who is like, they're in a weird spot because they really don't have, that bench is really, really thin, and that goes into like the main question I have for this team is what young guy is going to step up off that bench. Like, is it Julian Strawther, who had a really good summer league? Is it Peyton Watson, who I feel like has great two-way potential but hasn't put the offensive side of the ball, like offensive side of the game, together yet? Is it Christian Braun, who I already think is really, really solid for them, but is that offensive game going to come around? It's like they don't really have anybody offensively consistently coming off that bench, and I'm interested to see what young guy steps up. But I do feel like Russell Westbrook, if he was to run that second unit, could make it a lot easier for these guys compared to a Reggie Jackson, who's more of a bucket getter off the bench, compared to a Westbrook who, yeah, can get downhill, but he's also a great playmaker who can create for others, and it's going to make the game a lot easier on a guy like Julian Strawther, who I hope gets a little bit more playing time this year, a Peyton Watson, even a Christian Braun, just getting easy looks for guys, just getting downhill. I just feel like this Denver Nuggets team can play really, really slow at times, and I think looking into this year, having a Russell Westbrook, even at his age, to push the pace of the game is going to be huge. I feel like this Denver Nuggets team, yes, because they have Nikola Jokic, is really slow and methodical at times, and I feel like it can kind of work against them and make them a little bit easier to guard. So especially when you're playing an athletic team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, which they just played, that has size, you felt like they were just kind of getting beat to the punch at every single aspect of the game at times against the Timberwolves. So looking at Russell Westbrook, like, he can push the pace of the game, and I feel like he can give this Denver Nuggets team a jolt that they kind of have been missing since they won the championship with a guy like Bruce Brown. You see that comparison a lot. Westbrook and Bruce Brown, it's going to be a little bit different because I think Westbrook playmaking and just having the ball in his hands is way better than Bruce Brown. But that same jolt that Bruce Brown gave them athletically, just getting up and down the floor, the cuts, like all that kind of stuff, I feel like Russell Westbrook can provide them, and I feel like they were really, really missing some of that athleticism and that defense that Russell Westbrook can provide that Bruce Brown wasn't there for last year. So looking at that, I still think the Denver Nuggets are obviously going to be still a really, really good team, but I think they have some flaws that are worth mentioning and worth noting. The spacing, who's going to step up off that bench, And I feel like the X factor is MPJ. Is MPJ going to be able to take another leap? Because I feel like this team desperately needs MPJ to kind of take another jump. But that is all I have for this episode of the Barrel Talk Podcast. Hope to see you tune in to future episodes.